I hope that we can avoid a complete meltdown, despite the title that you've chosen this year. But I do have to recognize that in the 12 months since we were last together, quite a lot has happened, and some of it is quite challenging. The cyber threat landscape has changed significantly. The security challenges we face from cyber attacks and other cyber-enabled threats have continued to evolve and have continued to grow. We find ourselves battling to prevent our elections from being interfered with, combating attempts at manipulation through the malicious use of disinformation. But the topic which has grabbed the most headlines so far this year, in 2019, is in some ways an even bigger challenge. How best protect our digital critical infrastructure? An issue that goes beyond the simple question of whether or not we should allow Huawei to build our 5G networks. What we need to think about is how do we strengthen our digital resilience as a whole? Digital resilience, after all, is crucial for protecting government information, industrial research, intellectual property, business plans, elections and democratic institutions, as well as protection of our personal data. And to do this, we need to protect that digital infrastructure, the essential plumbing of our modern connected lives, 5G, but also the cloud and AI. At present, as you know, European companies collectively have about 30% of the 5G market. That's good, but they're challenged. They're more expensive than the competition. Meanwhile, more than 90% of our IT devices are made in Asia, notably in China. And China controls 70% of the global supply of the critical raw materials you need to make those devices. US and Chinese investment in AI dwarfs European investment. For example, France has just declared a program, which is very welcome, investing 1.5 billion euros in AI. Over the same timescale, a single city in China, Tianjin, is investing 13.5 billion euros. This kind of dependency inevitably creates risks and vulnerabilities. The US has moved to protect its own cutting-edge technologies, often using the Committee on Foreign Investments and US screening process. It's reacted to the new Chinese national intelligence law, which, as you know, obliges Chinese companies to work with Chinese intelligence by banning US government agencies from using Huawei or ZTE, and is encouraging other countries to do likewise. China, for its part, has long guarded and controlled access to its domestic market while vigorously pursuing international expansion in infrastructure, real as well as digital. So in my view, it's high time for Europe to make some choices. It's time to discuss whether we want to continue, as now, to see our own cutting-edge technologies sold off one after another. We also need to consider whether it makes sense for individual countries to let out their 5G spectrum with little or no coordination on what others are doing, which inevitably risks allowing one dominant supplier to emerge across the continent. Better coordination would also help our collective investment in AI and other vital technologies, quantum computing, cryptography, and others, to be more than the sum of its parts. And these issues raise challenges around national decision-making, which won't be easy to resolve. Trying to protect everything won't work. We need to decide what really matters in terms of the digital ecosystem, and whether greater transparency around suppliers, supply chains, foreign investment is enough to offset the security risks. It may be that some pieces of backbone digital infrastructure are simply too critical to risk. Again, these issues are inherently geopolitical, so the solutions, in my view, need to reflect Europe's particular perspective, based around keeping markets open and trade fair. Security concerns are not an excuse for arbitrary protectionism, but equally, we can't ignore them. These aren't issues that can be settled overnight. We're going to need time to debate and develop a comprehensive approach. But we should also be asking ourselves, what can be done now already using the terms and conditions and the instruments that we already have in place? First, the EU has approved a Cybersecurity Act, which is going to reinforce the mandate of the EU Cybersecurity Agency to better support member states in tackling cybersecurity threats and attacks. The Act also establishes an EU framework for cybersecurity certification, boosting the cybersecurity of online services and consumer devices. I think we can expect 5G infrastructure, Internet of Things devices, to be an important part of the agency's work. Salute the head of the agency who's sitting here with us. Second, under the Directive on Security of Network and Information Systems, the so-called Nist Directive, all member states have to adopt a national strategy defining the objectives and appropriate policy and regulatory measures. This includes designating at least one competent authority to monitor the application of the directive at national level and to nominate a point of contact to liaise and ensure cross-border cooperation across the European Union. Third, the Foreign Direct Investment Screening Regulation. Yes, Europe's got one too. Once it's in force, will allow the Commission and Member States to cooperate in their assessment of security risks and raise specific concerns posed by foreign investments, including in digital infrastructure. Fourth, the EU's rules on procurement, while they don't differentiate between EU and non-EU companies, do include a number of safeguards, including measures to protect essential security interests. Reciprocity is another key issue. The EU actively pursues new opportunities for European companies by ensuring reciprocity in international procurement markets. And while the rules don't cover the provision of communication networks, they do cover the equipment used to build those networks. Fifth, the European Electronic Communications Code, agreed last summer, will boost investment in very high-capacity networks across the EU, including facilitating the rollout of 5G by making co-investment rules more predictable, promoting sustainable competition, and again, our security. These instruments give member states the opportunity, the scope, to take action to better protect our critical digital infrastructure. But it also requires the political will to act. It's important that we're going to have to continue this discussion. We need to consider all of these elements if we're going to face up to this challenge. As far as the Commission is concerned, we will continue to push this agenda and work as closely as we can with the member states. Meanwhile, we're faced with some other challenges as well. The pernicious threat from the use of disinformation and the manipulation of data and behavior, particularly important in relation to the security of our elections and democratic processes. Malicious actors, both state and non-state, are increasingly using digital tools to seek to interfere in our democratic processes and to manipulate public opinion. The European Parliament elections are now just a few short months away, and I'm afraid they present a particularly tempting target. That's why we've called on the internet companies back in April last year to take urgent action through a voluntary code of practice. The code was eventually agreed in September, and we followed that up with an action plan on disinformation at the end of last year. In the longer term, we're going to need to do more to ensure media diversity and to build critical awareness. We're going to need to continue to improve media literacy, for example, through using tools like the NewsGuard browser, which utilizes a team of journalists to check the credibility of news media against a transparent list of criteria in order to give credible sites a green tick and potential sources of disinformation a red cross. It helps to give users a sense of the provenance of what it is that they are seeing. But we also need to look at other sorts of more immediate action. We need to see an improvement in how we detect and call out examples of disinformation. The Commission has something called the Stratcom Task Force that does that work. We're building something called the EU Hybrid Fusion Cell, which will reinforce it. We need to continue to reinforce our work with the member states. and we are building a new disinformation rapid alert system in advance of those European Parliament elections. And we need to see the internet platforms step up and make real progress on the commitments that they signed up to in the Code of Practice. Those commitments include urgent improvement in how adverts are placed online, greater transparency around sponsored content, rapid and effective identification and deletion of fake accounts, clearer rules around bots, though personally I don't know why we allow bots to circulate political information at all, more effective promotion of alternative narratives, greater clarity around how the algorithms are operating in the political space. All of this subject to independent oversight and audit. Last month we published a report on the progress that was being made against these objectives, which recognized that a lot of good work had been done, but also underlined the concerns that we still have about the slow pace of progress. We're going to need to go further and faster if these efforts are to have the required impact needed ahead of the European parliamentary elections in May. We're going to report every month between now and then, frankly, to maximize the pressure and get progress in the time remaining. We're also continuing to implement our proposals from 2017 to address the more classic cybersecurity threats targeting systems and data. We're continuing to roll out the new cybersecurity strategy in order to build our resilience, strengthen deterrence, and support member states in cyber defense. That includes the creation of a genuine European cybersecurity agency, as I mentioned, as well as a network of competence centres to improve our resilience and target our research. We've taken important steps on deterrence to create real and credible disincentives for those who might contemplate attacking us, including improving law enforcement access to electronic evidence. We've put in place a set of measures for a joint EU diplomatic response to malicious cyber activities, which includes working together with third countries and the possibility of restrictive measures. Indeed, we're now in the process of refining a cyber sanctions regime and working to tackle some of the challenges around, for example, attribution. Our efforts to strengthen cybersecurity across the European Union, whether in the short, medium, or long term, need to continue. Whatever happens in the European elections, whatever happens with the new Commission, whatever happens around Brexit, the malicious actors who seek to harm us are not going anywhere. And it's only by working together all across Europe that we can successfully tackle these threats and avoid the risk of a security meltdown. Thank you. Thank you very much.